When you're happy, that's a rejuvenating and sustainable place. It's not tiring. When we're struggling, stressed, those take energy away. So what happens is when the brain starts to learn these new patterns and they make us feel better, it's more efficient. So it allows that to continue.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Lisa, it is great to have you on the Home of Healthspan today. Before we get into all your work and everything you do, how would you describe yourself?
Well, I'm a lively humanitarian. I'm a mother of adult kids and a partner and a social person who loves adventure.
Okay. One thing that you didn't include that I know you as is a neurofeedback specialist, right? And I think for our listeners, it might be helpful to just set the table on what is neurofeedback.
So neurofeedback is a way to train brainwaves to get stuck patterns to release, and that helps reduce symptoms. I'm a mental health professional, right, under that humanitarian umbrella. And I found neurofeedback in like 2015, 16, in that era. And it's a way to add to mental health approaches that really makes a remarkable difference.
Okay. And so is it, we think about healthcare, that a lot of times in this country, healthcare is truly sick care. It's, hey, once things are wrong, we put this in. And with neurofeedback, is it only used or helpful in response to when things are going wrong? Or, because I think I've seen, and maybe this is not the same stuff, like Kirk Cousins or other quarterbacks and athletes, Steph Curry, will use it to help train. And so it can also be an optimization, like, hey, I'm here, but I could really, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely an optimization technique. In fact, a lot of people will come in for peak performance type goals, as well as repair and healing and improvement for function. So they can go hand in hand. The optimization piece is why I think this is such a good fit for your show, right? Because as we grow and age and move into, different phases of our lives, different stressors impact us differently, right? And so the optimization piece comes into play in all kinds of areas with, daily function, like sleep trouble. It's wonderful for sleep. It helps get rid of the I wake up within 5 minutes of 1:07 a.m. every night, or I can't get my brain to shut off and fall asleep, that I hear so many 40s, 50s, year old folks struggle with that. And then we know older folks, right, elderly, that sleep is really fragmented. And if you can't sleep, you're not filling your bucket.
Let's dive into that sleep bucket, right? So if you're using neurofeedback for sleep, so I think about like CBT is something used a lot of times for people with insomnia. What does neurofeedback, what does the treatment, the process, so someone comes in and says, hey, I'm having a really hard time staying asleep, or I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't fall back asleep. How does neurofeedback get used or help them in those situations?
Well, so neurofeedback, the way we approach it starts with recording your brain rhythm to see what's going on. So your EEG, your electroencephalogram, is your brain rhythm, like EKG is heart rhythms. And so it starts with a very non-invasive recording where the biggest invasiveness is the Scoopy gel that gets put in your hair. And you just sit for 10 minutes, eyes open as still as you can, and eyes closed for 10 minutes as still as you can. And we record the activity that's going on with this cap and this gel, and that's wired to an amplifier that makes your teeny tiny brain waves loud enough or large enough for software to record. And then I clean out, physiological stuff, yawns, muscle tension, eye blink, pulse, anything. Those are normal human things. But with the software, I can kind of remove those from the data and see what's going on with your brainwaves. So insomnia often has some signature, what we call biomarkers, or patterns that are very common with a specific complaint. And so we can often know before they tell us, are you having trouble falling asleep? Or are you having trouble staying asleep? Are you moving through the stages of sleep to get restorative sleep patterns, so you wake rested and all those things. So the EEG is the starting point, and it tells us lots of information.
And it can do that even though your troubles are at night when you're trying to sleep, but you're presumably not in the middle of the night doing this. You're
right.
Middle of the day coming into an office, doing the EEG. And even at that point of the day, you can see, oh, your brain waves are at this kind of thing. That's getting in the way.
Right. So for example, there are patterns that are prominent when there's a lot of overarousal in a person's system, in their nervous system and in their brain. And so depending where those are in the brain, so if they're at the vertex, which is kind of like the unicorn horn spot, it's where the baby's soft spot, the last soft spot to fuse, is like, we call that the vertex. If those are showing us very fast overarousal waves, or what we call hyperexcitability, that makes it very difficult for the person's muscles to truly relax. So when you're sleeping, if the branch hits the window, your partner might roll over and not hear it, or wake and go right back to sleep. But you might be then, now I'm awake for 2 hours. Because you don't have the rhythms that help you stay into the sleep cycles.
I assume things like that would impact your HRV, your heart rate variability. There are a lot of other biomarkers outside the brain that it's having the impact on the body because you're not getting that deep rest, that balancing the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems.
Yeah, really true. We talk about light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. And those are the stages we need to move through continually. So we ideally have 4 to 5 cycles of moving through all those stages in the night. That's why we come up with 7 to 8 hours, because it takes that long to get through. And your deep sleep is when your brain bathes, basically. Cerebral spinal fluid is pumped through. We remove toxins and dead cells and waste and really give new nutrients and, all this stuff. So that's important for like longevity, sharpness, all that. Then REM sleep is where you consolidate learning that happened during the day and how you process emotions. That's where dreams are so crazy, right? Like they can be really out there, but that's your body doing that for you, your brain doing that for you. So yeah, so we need all that. And the HRV is a great indicator. That's heart rate variability. And I know you've talked about that on your show before, but that's that flexibility in between almost your heart beats to shift gears. And the more flexibility, the healthier, right? We say. So if you're really stuck and you can't shift gears, that HRV score is going to be really low, right? So it does impact all that.
So you come in, you're doing an EEG to get that baseline. But I guess that's not the neurofeedback. That's just getting the baseline of data. Then there's some treatment or activity after that. So once you have this baseline, then you identify an issue. What's the next step?
Right. So we take the data and we come up with what's called a brain map, is the slang. It's a QEEG, quantitative electroencephalogram. That's our report that guides our treatment, right? And our brain training. So neurofeedback is the training. And that is the traditional path of neurofeedback is a learning paradigm. It's positive reinforcement. So someone would come in, they'd have 1 to 5 sensors on their head, and they're watching a screen and a video, a show, a game, something along those lines, or listening to something, sometimes both. And if their brain's going in the direction we want, so say we want the hyperarousal waves to be lower in power, the screen will stay bright, the video will flow smoothly. the sound is crisp, and there's no stutter to the buffering, so to speak. If the brain goes back to the patterns that are causing trouble, which it does, the screen looks like a shadow comes over it from the outside or covers the whole thing. And the sound may get quiet, or the video doesn't flow smoothly. And without having to try, your brain, not your mind, but like your brain will want to get back to that thing it was engaged in. It's a pleasure-seeking organ, right? So wait, what happened to my show kind of a thing? And it will try all kinds of brainwaves and patterns and rhythms to see, how do I get that back? And so the positive reinforcement is the bright screen or the clear sound. And over time, it figures it out. What's really cool is even the first session, you see, as we're watching data on the screen, and we can see their monitor, right? So we can see how dark or light it is. The brain by 7-8 minutes starts to figure it out. And so we can tell by both numbers, but also the screen stays brighter longer, right? Or the sound hasn't disappeared. So as they continue to train each session, the brain figures it out sooner and sooner and sooner. And then it starts to show up in regular life.
And this translates, it translates maybe to better sleep, but I guess to higher performance, because there's a show on Netflix, Quarterback, that each season follows different quarterbacks. In the very first season, one of them was Kirk Cousins, and they had him in the car with something strapped on his head watching this video. It must have been for some listeners maybe too young to remember, like when you had the antenna and you're having to try to get the signal in, like it's your brain basically doing that. Okay. And so you're training to get at a certain frequency, and then I guess repeated training on that, and it learns, hey, this is a good thing, without you thinking about it in the middle of the night. Your brain just like goes into those good waves, or
right. Well, so think about when you're happy, calm, peaceful, content, whatever you want to call it, in your good space. That's a rejuvenating and sustainable place. It's not tiring, right? When we're struggling, stressed, hypervigilant, angry, any of the things that drain us, those take energy away. So what happens is when the brain starts to learn these new patterns and they make us feel better, it's more efficient, right? It doesn't drain us. So it allows that to continue. So as it generalizes, these brain changes in the brain patterns generalize to your regular life, we then work to get them more robust. So first they're subtle, right? So maybe it didn't take you as long to fall asleep. Or maybe you did wake up, but you were able to go back to sleep again, right? But then we want them more robust and consistent. So we're seeing it most nights. We're seeing it, maybe it only took me 20 minutes, which is a normal, healthy span to fall asleep, right? Not 2 hours.
Right.
And then when it's really robust and consistent, we wean to see what does it hold.
Okay. And so is this like a weekly treatment, and then you go down to monthly? What does it look like in terms of frequency and the weaning?
Yeah. Well, so each session runs 45 minutes to an hour-ish. And then we really want twice a week. 3 times a week is actually ideal, but most people just can't schedule-wise. But twice a week, we get really great results. It's just like if you're going to go to the gym and work on your biceps once a week, you might make little gains, but you're going to get frustrated. And if you miss a week, you're 2 weeks out. So twice a week is really needed, especially in the beginning. That consistency in the beginning really sets the stage well. So yeah, that's kind of what it looks like. How long it takes depends on what we're working on. And what I found in the EEG, how serious, how long have you struggled with something? If it's been lifelong and I'm talking to a 58-year-old, we have some work to do.
Most corporate wellness programs overwhelm employees with too much, or they offer too little to be useful. Lively gets it right. We start with each employee's data and goals, then serve one clear, personalized action at a time. No noise, just real behavioral change. The outcome? A healthier, happier workforce, and measurable impact for your business. Visit alively.com to see personalized wellness in action.
We've talked mostly about sleep, and we've talked about optimization without getting specific to what that means. But where else could this or would this be useful for people?
So the neat thing about this field, neurotherapy, which just means there's lots of different types, is that it really is perfect for aging healthily, right? Like moving into your later stages, because cognition pieces, so clear thinking, memory issues like those tip of the tongue, or my word finding is falling off and I'm noticing, difficulty acquiring new knowledge. Like, have you ever known an older person who can't figure out the new remote for the TV, right? It's just baffling to them. Or, other types of learning that even we do all through our whole life. But so those pieces are great fits for this. The memory stuff often has to do with brain patterns, deficits in areas that help control memory. And we can prime that engine again and get that back up to speed. And then brain fog, executive function trouble, those things, are good responders. So cognitive stuff.
What about for children? Children that may have, whether it's ADHD or it seems like just watching when these quarterbacks would use it, I assume it's to better learn the playbook or remember in the real time. So for a child trying to be better in school and consolidate those memories and the learning, is there an age that's too young to do this, or what does it look like for children? Well,
yeah, there is, in the sense of they have to be able to pay attention, right? But we've done 4 and 5, not super often, but you can do little, but a 2 and a 3 would be really, really tough. Never mind, because they're going to want to get up and down and spin around in the chair and do all the funny stuff. But we love working with kids, actually. And it's one of my favorite things is the children and the families that are struggling with emotional meltdowns, because it disrupts the whole house, the whole family. And it gets in the way of school learning. And it gets in the way of the social development with friends and peers. And usually they've tried everything. They've tried meds, they've tried, their pediatricians recommended us, they've tried behavioral plans, So yeah, and actually the kids respond really well because their brain is so plastic and they haven't had 40 decades of experience, 40 years of experience and stuff to cement patterns in their head.
So they can dial it in maybe fewer treatments or faster than maybe an adult that you're saying, hey, we're having to override a bunch of decades long patterns. Or like, you've only been doing this a couple of years. We can kind of override and train it faster.
Yeah, for the most part. The more severe things like a severe autism spectrum case, those take a long time. Seizure can take a long time. It works, but it takes a long time. And head injury, bad TBI, and that's my other kind of focus is I do a lot of concussion work. So that Kirk Cousins thing is he's my hero, right? Because he's in the NFL. Well, he was, in the eye.
Yeah, he still is. I mean, he got put in the game last weekend.
Oh yeah. Well, so yeah, and he would do it every off season. As soon as they were done, he'd start again. It's awesome.
And I mean, you brought up the concussion and TBI. My understanding is there was a long time that we thought concussion, hey, you need to rest the brain, you need to do all this. And it's actually the exact opposite. Like you need to be doing stuff like this to engage it. That actually repairs it faster. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, within up to symptom, right? So bringing back activity, now they say within 48 hours, with bringing in very gradual return to activity, whether it's just a walk, or, it depends how severe the injury was. But yeah, because you're not letting things get so dysregulated and unwired, let's call it. But yeah, and the neuro for the mental health portions of concussion is amazing, as well as pain. People suffer with years sometimes of daily pain from a concussion that they've never been able to get to go away. And it works.
And for people that want to do this, right? So you have a practice in Colorado.
I actually have 2. So I'm in Illinois outside of Chicago and in Colorado outside of Denver.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when I saw it, Kirk Cousins, he was doing it with his phone in the car. Are there at-home devices or are they not that trustworthy?
There are, my kind of approach is that I want to make sure what we're doing works before I would oversee home training, because I can see and make adjustments in the office first. But we do have several clients that train from home with, they have a smaller type unit. It's not quite the medical grade quality of what we have in the offices, but it does the trick when they've already are on a good path.
I mean, is it similar to like physical therapy of, hey, you need to go to the physical therapist and you learn the exercise and you do a certain number and then they kind of give you the exercises to do at home. And you can, if you needed to go 3 times a week or better, but you could only drive into the office once, maybe the other 2 you could do there. And each week you're still going, but you're getting those extra sessions in.
Yeah, because, some people live 2 hours. So I'll have them come in for just like a week and a half or 2 weeks. We call it an intensive. And they work with us every day or sometimes twice a day until we really know we've dialed in what protocols work for them. And then they can do as much as they want from home and we can see what's going on, either live during the actual session, or I can review data and make sure they're still on the right track. And then, as progress comes, they wean down to less sessions. Sometimes there's additional, once in a while, we will redo the EEG to make sure we're on the right track, that the changes are sufficient. But most of the time, the person's report is really what we go by. If they're really doing great and they feel great, awesome.
Yeah. And you talk about the protocols. So it's not everybody's getting the same treatment. So it may be the same process of the video going dark, but I guess what you're trying to reinforce and reward may be different kinds of waves, or what is the variability there?
Exactly. Yeah, it's really unique to each person because we're going off their EEG and nobody's are the same. And you could have 2 people walking with the same exact complaint, but their brains will look really different. Or their brains look alike, but they have different issues that they want, right? So the protocols are the lessons, right? And so most people do 2 to 3 protocols in a session. And they're targeting not only areas that go with the dysregulation, but these teeny levels down to a tenth of an amp, like we're working on amplitude training, it might be, well, we need to drop from 12 to 11.8 for this person, but that person, it was fine, So it's very individualized, and it should be. So if you go somewhere and they're like, well, we'll start you here, and they haven't done any EEG, and they're like, well, we start everybody here, your radar should be up.
Okay.
Because it's your brain. You want to guess. So,
I mean, speaking of the coming in initially, what are the top 5 reasons people come in, or you would recommend? You're like, hey, this is someone, like, sure, everybody could get some benefit from it, right? Like even these NFL quarterbacks are already at the top, they can get a benefit from it. But here, in terms of greatest impact for someone who's going to invest this kind of time and money, what would those, concussion or some insomnia, what are the things?
Well, concussion for sure. Because if you don't intervene, your brain, we have a saying, what fires together wires together. So if you have damage and your brain is repeating things that are causing symptoms and you don't intervene, they can grow into other trouble. So concussion, anxiety is of different sorts is the number one thing that comes in the door. And that impacts sleep. It impacts social life. It impacts your career. It impacts your relationships, right? So anxiety is number 2. Learn a lot of learning. We do a lot of learning work, ADD, ADHD, dyscalculia, dyslexia, processing speed issues. So that's great for kids and teens and even adults. But and then I would say we are seeing more of like cognitive decline. Older folks that are like this, they are not liking where their memory is, or they're already diagnosed as a starting mild cognitive impairment. And they want some help with that. So that's a big one. Other things are peak performance, right? But one of the biggest ones, and my friends and family are tired of me hearing this from me, but is if you are trying medications for mental health, get your EEG done first. because it tells us a lot. What meds might be contraindicated, what might be a better fit, or is there something else going on, like underlying seizure activity that you don't know about? And then we really have to be careful with meds. So that's a big one, I would say. And to have a baseline EEG is good for all of us because you'll have it as you age and you can compare. So barring, a head injury or a very severe illness, your EEG is pretty stable.
That's a really important point because I think about it a lot, especially for female hormones of like, hey, don't wait until your 40s when things are feeling funky because you don't have a baseline. Do it at 18, do it at 20 to get a baseline of here's when I'm healthy, what I look like, so I can know over time if I'm getting out of balance. I assume for all of us, it's similar with an EEG of if I only come in when I have a problem, I don't know what right looks like for me. So almost like that healthy visit is a great place to start.
Yeah. I mean, we try to push, if your kids are playing sports, right? Get a baseline EEG, maybe one in junior high and then maybe one each year in high school, especially if you're playing football, lacrosse, soccer, hockey, the big impact sports. Because you have a baseline then to know how do I get back to? What level should I be getting back to if you have a concussion?
And for that, assuming, a listener is not in Illinois, not in Colorado, how would they go about identifying and finding in their area a reputable practitioner to go work with? That's
a really important question. So we have a couple professional associations that help us that host like the board certifications. So there's a minimum of 2 board certifications in the field. One is board certification for neurofeedback. And the board that does that is called bcia.org, Board Certification International Alliance.org. It's a mouthful, but they have a directory. So you can go in and say, find a provider, put in your zip code or a city, state, and it's for global. It's all over the world. So it's an international certification board. The other one is IQCB.org, International QEEG Certification Board. .org, and they also have a directory to find a provider, and that's also global, right? And you really do want someone who's done that due diligence. It's a lot of hours, it's a lot of study, it's a lot of mentorship, and a huge exam for each of them. And it's, the neat thing is the field as a whole is super collaborative. And I found you could talk to somebody in any corner of the U.S. and they're like, oh yeah, I know somebody, and help, or they can review cases with you. And the consultation and collaborative piece is beautiful. It's really a powerful piece. So,
yeah, I'm looking these organizations up. Sorry, I got the second one, but the first one, BCIA, or is it something?
Yes, BCIA.org.
Okay.
They're both .org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I will have to check them out and go get my baseline before anything more happens to this old brain of mine. Well, Lisa, this is fantastic. I guess looking forward, what areas are you most excited about kind of on the frontier of this space that we're just learning about or new developments are coming about?
This is broad, but I am excited about it. Research has been traditionally difficult, partly because it's hard to do the gold standard, which is a random controlled trial, because the technician or the practitioner is looking at data as the person is training. So it's hard to blind them, right? There are some new methods that are coming out because there were studies that debunked this. But when you have to do an individualized protocol. You can't take one protocol and say, okay, we're going to work on depression and we're only going to do these bandwidth ranges for everybody. You can't do that because their brains are so different. So it makes research difficult, but there have been some really cool studies coming out that are able to do it random and have a control group.
It scares me a little bit on the control because I'm not creative, but the control I would think is you just randomize both for the practitioner and the person what
for
they're
double
seeing.
Blind.
But back to, the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. You could be training them to do worse brainwaves that are like really unhealthy for them. So that scares me.
I agree. And there's a lot of different fields that we can't do research like that because the control is, troublesome. Or if the variable group proves healthy, or helpful, they have to offer it to the control group after, right? There's some ethical guidelines like that for research. But, things like, is it as, there's studies that show ADHD 1-to-1, methylphenidate, right, which is one of the traditional medications, versus neurofeedback training. The outcomes were the same, both effective. The difference is if you take the methylphenidate away, the child's back to where it was, right? He or she. If you take the neurofeedback away, they're still there. And actually, there's some outcomes that show 4 to 6 months beyond your training, you will continue to see improvement. So even post-training, you're done. You're not going to the office anymore. You're still getting benefits and it's building. So that's a difference. So you got a medication-free or medication-limited, right?
I mean, I know which one I would want.
Yeah. And if I was a parent of a little one now that struggled with that, I'd want to try, So.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, this is you've given me a lot to think about, do some research on my own, and go act on, because this is something I've heard about, but I've never personally experienced, and it sounds like something it's a great place to get a healthy baseline. So I'm looking forward to doing it. For people who want to learn more about it, learn more about you, where can they find you? What should they be doing?
The website is mindbodyneuro.com, and that can get you to either Illinois or Colorado. If you're interested in jumping in and you mentioned, you heard it on this podcast, like we offer a 10% discount for any of the people come that way. But there's also just information on the website if you are uncertain. We do, a free consult so people can call and plan that. It can be in person or Zoom. And or you just need help finding a provider. I'm happy to do that too and help you navigate those directories and such, because there's people all over the world, but you really want someone who's got put in the work, right?
Well, thank you so much for this work and for bringing it to the attention of our listeners and everybody you work with. I think a lot of people think about health and fitness, and it'll be very physical, but to me, the far scarier thing is losing your mind, right? Like I've had grandparents with Alzheimer's and other things, and that it's a very scary thing, regardless of what your body may feel or look like with your mind not being there. So having more tools in the arsenal to get ahead of that, to stave that off, to delay it, is incredibly important and impactful. So thank you for the work you're doing here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. And it's something you can do. I'll do it for the rest of my life, right? To keep everything sharp, and it's good stuff. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.